All right, well, hey, welcome back, guys. We're finally getting started on The Spirit of the Disciplines by Dallas Willard. We're in chapter 1 today, and we're going to be looking at how to discover the secret of becoming like Jesus, or as Willard calls it, the secret of the easy yoke. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've been a pastor for a little over 11 years now, and one thing has become apparent to me. It seems like there's no real expectation amongst Christians that they can become like Jesus in this life. Now, this is the problem that Willard highlights at the beginning of this chapter. When many people look at Jesus, they correctly see that his life was filled with goodness and power. His life was beautiful, almost to the point of being otherworldly. And because of all these things, they conclude that his kind of life is out of reach for them. It was well and good that Jesus was like that, but they see it as a difficulty or as an impossibility that they can be like that. Meanwhile, on the flip side of thinking that being good like Jesus is an impossibility, we readily embrace the idea that being unrighteous from time to time is normal. I mean, just think about the ways we accept stuff like little white lies or gossip or greed, or we dismiss things as being just normal sins. This way of thinking about the impossibilities or difficulties of becoming really good versus accepting as fact that we're going to do bad things is a big problem, according to Willard. He even suggests that we've been deceived into thinking the good life, the life of Jesus, is the one that's difficult, when it's actually the life that we accept as normal. That's the difficult life. And these aren't just his philosophical thoughts, but Proverbs 13 verse 15 even says it. It says, the way of the transgressor is hard, not the way of the righteous. So while we may look at Jesus' cost of discipleship as being burdensome to the point of impossibility, and we accept non-discipleship as routine and easy, the stuff of life as it were, it's the reverse that's true. Discipleship to Jesus ends up being the easy and happy way to live, while non-discipleship ends up being a path filled with crushing burdens. On this subject, Willard wrote, the cost of discipleship, though it may take all we have, is small when compared to the lot of those who don't accept Christ's invitation to be a part of his company in the way of life. This is why Jesus said to the crowd filled with beleaguered people like you and I in Matthew chapter 11, come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke, he says, is easy, and my burden is light. But the problem, according to Willard, is located right there. Jesus has made the offer to anyone who wants to experience his easy yoke and light burden in place of the crushing burdens that they've been carrying for such a long time. But people don't know the secret of taking the yoke from Jesus and putting it on their necks, as it were. So what do? Well, instead of taking the yoke in the way Jesus is offering, they go out there and try really hard to obey what Jesus said. They try to do things like bless those who curse them, turn the other cheek when someone slaps them, give to everyone who asks of them, and all that other great stuff Jesus said. And I think we can all answer from experience what happens when you try really hard to be like Jesus. You fail really bad, don't you? So Willard uses this great sports analogy to highlight the futility of attempting to become like Jesus by gritting your teeth. He points out a common thing that kids do all around the world when they're playing sports. That is, they go out when it's game time, they try to emulate their favorite athlete, but they do so by sticking out their tongue during the game to be like Mike, or holding the baseball bat over their head in a specific way to be like Ken Griffey. Now, we've all done that. I remember doing it when the lights are on. And we all remember that Gatorade commercial, be like Mike. But we also all know that sticking out your tongue won't help you hit the shot when the pressure's on. Neither will yelling Kobe in hopes that the shot will go in. And if we had some kid come up to us and say, I'm going to be a great basketball player, and all we saw them doing was sticking their tongue out or yelling something during the game in order to imitate other great players, we would all know that greatness is not going to be something that this kid ever experiences if they stay on that same path. Willard notes that the success of an athlete comes because he chose an overall life of preparation of mind and body, pouring all his energies into that total preparation to provide a foundation in the body's automatic responses and strength for his conscious efforts during the game. Therefore, a successful performance at a moment of crisis rests largely and essentially upon the depths of a self wisely and rigorously prepared in the totality of its being, mind, and body. Okay, I think he got a little bit too philosophical there. All he's saying is that the athlete performs well during the game because they spend the entirety of their lives preparing for the game. He goes on to say, in this truth lies the secret of the easy yoke. The secret involves living as Jesus lived in the entirety of his life, adopting his overall lifestyle. Following in his steps cannot be equated with behaving as he did when he was on the spot. To live as Christ lived is to live as he did all of his life. The main problem, therefore, is that our attempts at Christ-likeness are happening in the wrong place. If you think that following Jesus means trying to do what he said in the heat of the moment while continuing to live the rest of your life just like everyone else around you, this approach is no different from those kids sticking out their tongue while playing basketball. It's a strategy, says Willard, that's bound to fail, and it's bound to make the way of Christ seem difficult and impossible. Meanwhile, in truth, it's not the way of Christ any more than striving to act in a certain manner in the heat of a game is the way of the champion athlete. So what's the secret of the easy yoke? If it's not trying really hard to obey Jesus in the heat of the moment, what is it? Well, it's the same advice we'd give to a young aspiring athlete, isn't it? We tell them to try to emulate their favorite athlete in their preparation, not simply in their performance. And for the one wanting to be like Christ, we would tell them to emulate him in his preparation, not simply when he's surrounded by thousands of people. In other words, it is learning from Christ how to live our total lives, how to invest all our time and our energies of mind and body as he did. We must learn how to follow his preparations, the disciplines for life in God's rule that enabled him to receive his Father's constant and effective support while doing the will of his Father. So the secret of the easy yoke is simply the intelligent, informed, unyielding resolve to live as Jesus lived in all aspects of his life, not just in the moment of specific choice or when the lights are on. See, the goal is to become the kind of person who routinely and easily does what Jesus says without having to think about it. The professional athlete isn't out there thinking about what they need to do next. They're just reacting. And true Christ-likeness, as Willard points out, comes at the point where it's hard not to respond as Jesus would. It comes when you react without having to think about it. And he will help you become that kind of person if you take on his easy yoke by following him in the entirety of his life. So how do we do that? Those are questions I'm sure you're asking. How do we emulate Jesus in the entirety of our lives? And what about grace? Is Willard really suggesting that we can do all this through our own willpower or effort? Well, you'll have to stay tuned for those answers in future episodes. Now, I promised to try and include some activities for you all to do. So here's the first one. And it actually comes by way of my oldest daughter, Charlie. So we've had a lot more time to sit with one another during dinner, and Charlie's been pulling some great questions for us to answer during dinner time. And she asked two really good ones that were appropriate for this study. The first question was, what kind of person do you want to be in 5 years? I think that's thought-provoking enough, isn't it? Now, here's the second question. I love this question. If you spent the next 5 years doing what you did today, what kind of person would you be then? If you want, you can answer those questions or maybe ask it to some friends or family members to generate conversation. But as you do so, think of it in terms of this study. Also, if you have any questions about chapter 1, you can leave them in the comments section or email them to me. I'll leave my email address in the description. And I'll try to open the next session by answering some of the questions from the previous chapter. Oh, also, if you want to email me a video of your question, maybe I can fit that into the next episode as well. Well, hey guys, that's the end of chapter 1. Thank you so much for tuning in. I never take it for granted that people would actually watch me and listen to what I have to say. So thank you. Thank you for your prayers. I'm praying for you as well. Don't forget to subscribe, man. Do not forget to subscribe so you can know when the next video is dropping. Until then, peace and goodness.